Ladies and gentlespoons, welcome to the Wild Wild West podcast. I am Richie Ritchie of the MHRT Network, wearing my Christmas Broncos hoodie here in the my office, which I've moved up a level in the house. I'm no longer in the basement being held captive, so this is good. And over that away, we have Alex, the real Alex Gibbons. You can catch him over on X. You can also catch his written content on Arrowhead Addict. And we got a little while for his other podcast to spin back up again, and that will be the Lightning Fast Fantasy Podcast with Alex and Coach Defense over on the Lockdown Defense network there. Down directly below, giving us his insight on his LA Chargers is DZ. Thank you, DZ, for joining us again. And down diagonally that way, it's kind of a little bit backwards because it's all a mirror here with cameras, is Jack giving us his perspective. Jack Kenna on his Las Vegas Raiders. Obviously, there was quite a bit of news last week on the Raiders, a little less so this week, but we will jump into Super Bowl and kick things off right away. Alex, obviously, we had you speak most of the show, last show, and
lay it on. Yeah, Broncos did really well in the Super Bowl, Mundungus.
You know, this is true. I think that you need to be careful about throwing stones in glass houses, and the fact that there's some teams that have never been to one. There's other temes that haven't
That's
been to one.
everything I could say would be throwing a stone in a glass house.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I know. Yeah. No, it's the jabs are well deserved, I'd say. Yeah, because that was not what I expected, nor I think what anyone expected. But to his credit, Angelo did pretty much predict that game to a T. So
I thought Angelo was crazy too, and I was like, "Whoa!" Like he must have saw something we didn't see.
Yeah, I mean, really, the biggest thing was just it was bound to happen at some point that the offensive line would get exposed for the patchwork that they've done in the later half of the of the season, moving Tooney out to left tackle, having your swing man play left guard, and just kind of getting by with that. And it was just perfect storm of a team with Fangio who played Mahomes entirely different than he ever has before in the past. They have, 4 or 5 elite, pass rushers and just D linemen up front. And that just, all culminated to the fact that, this patched together offensive line was just not able to do anything, just to stop them and give Mahomes time to do anything. So, I think they gave up 6 sacks, and it was just, the downfall was apparent pretty early on that, they're not going to be able to do much, and they're not helping themselves out. Like, they did not really commit to running the ball. They got in a pretty huge hole early, and then, all the flashy RPO stuff, and having to take deeper shots. By that point, Mahomes was so – you could visibly see he had no confidence in his line or a pocket being there. And, there's plenty of plays where things were open deep, and he just, got out early or didn't stay in to make the throw, which I don't really blame him because it was, 4 D linemen just barreling in on you basically the minute you're getting the ball. It's kind of hard to stand in there and make a throw. But, hats off to the Eagles. Like, that was a hell of just a dominating game from them. The final score doesn't really reflect how lopsided that was. But, I do think one thing we could put to bed, and maybe not, people will certainly probably try to skew the narrative further, but, they're certainly, that we at least figured out that this is not rigged for the Chiefs to win. So, all that malarkey could
Or
go. And
did the
honestly, the Chiefs
NFL
got some bad
yeah.
calls. I mean, the Chiefs had calls that did not go their way and calls that were not made, and I'm not bitching about them because that's not really what the root cause was for the game being the way it was. They just could not block people up front. They could not buy Mahomes anytime, and you know it was bound to happen that it would get exposed. You know the patchwork that they did throughout this year with the injuries they've had, and you know trying to take a left tackle in the second round to be your guy, and then that doesn't really work. So you move your all-pro left guard out, and then you're like, hey, you know, we won a Super Bowl last year with our backup left guard. Caliendo, get out there. And he had like a 30 PFF grade, like just abysmal, you know, and Trey Smith, who's projected to be the most coveted guard in free agency, you know, picked a really bad time to have his worst game ever. But yeah, you know, it was.
I also wonder, like, you know, with the refs, like, you know, since there was so much national attention and media on it, I wonder if, like, you know, the refs on one side's going, yeah, I don't know if I'm going to do this because then they're going to say, I'm that guy. So I'm just kind of curious. I'm glad that they let him play for the most part. I mean, but there was 15 penalties in the game.
Oh, I mean, yeah, there was a lot of flags. And I definitely think the added attention to it going into the game, you know, there was definitely some puckering from the officials on not wanting to get involved. And then, you know, the penalty happened on the Eagles' first drive, and they made up for it with the PI or personal foul call on McDuffie. And then it was, you know, they were relatively involved. But, you know, like for people who bitch and moaned all year that, like, if Mahomes got hit that way, that'd be a flag. We blatantly saw him get hit in a very aggressive, illegal way, and there was no penalty called. So I don't really want to hear any of that any longer.
The Jalen Carter one?
Yeah. Like, you know, come on. But, you know, and like the call on Bolton, like there was calls that the Chiefs didn't get. But again, you know, that's not really the reason the game was the way it was. They just could not block Philly up front. Philly was smart and did not blitz Mahomes a single time in the game and played mostly quarters coverage and forced, you know, the Chiefs' skilled position players to get open. And you know, pretty much proven that they don't really have the ability to do that. Or if they did, Mahomes, you know, they did not have the ability for Mahomes to have enough time to see it.
If you guys remember, Brady's only weakness was when they rushed 4 elite guys. And that just like that just showed it was like Fangio was like, hang on, maybe we can do this. And they dropped like in quarters, like you said, and it was just stifling.
No, but that's a Fangio. So I said in the last show that Fangio, with his experience, extensive experience against the Chiefs when he was a head coach of the Broncos, he had a stark difference between the first half when he played the Chiefs and the second half when he played the Chiefs. And a lot of that was the first portion of that time here. It was a Tyreek Hill show. But then even at the back end of when Tyreek Hill was there, Fangio was able to basically just cut the head off of that snake and keep KC to very modest scores comparatively for what they were used to. And that was back before KC was as balanced as they are now. KC today, compared to when Fangio was the head coach of the Denver Broncos, is a lot more balanced now than they used to be when Fangio was here. But Fangio, as the defensive juggernaut that he is, like he is that guy. He is that good as a defensive coordinator, and I think that he showed that in that game. It was a clinic, really, if you're going to be honest, in terms of defensively on how to dominate a game defensively. And what he was able to do is completely negate the run game because he can't run the ball when you have 3 guys in the backfield the entire game.
Chiefs didn't really try either.
But I also think you didn't get a call on the run game because you basically had two defensive linemen back there ready to high five Pacheco as he was taking the snap, right?
Yeah. And, I mean, outside of Mahomes' 4 carries, the running back room combined had 7 total carries in the game.
That's
I mean, total
crazy.
was only like 49 yards. They couldn't even break a 50-cent piece on that.
Mahomes was a leading rusher with 4 carries for 25 yards, and those weren't designed runs.
No, those were get me out of here. I hope I make it.
Yeah,
exactly. And then what he was able to do, because he was able to get home with either 3 or 4, was he was able to break the rest off into coverage, into very, very stifling coverage on key and core players on the Chiefs, and it was just complete domination defensively.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, that was absolute domination on defense.
Something that threw me off is, like, I don't follow the Eagles out that much. Like, we all know they're loaded, right? Like, we know they're a loaded team, and they have a really, I think the number 2 or arguably with Veach and Roseman, they're probably the 2 top GMs. But at no point this season did I see the Eagles be this dominant. I felt like maybe you could have said against Washington.
Yeah, but D said it's about who you go up against and
well,
who
that's
you
why
match
I say
up.
Any given Sunday, right? That's
No,
but
it's worse than that. Like, here's an example, right? If you have a slower secondary on your team, like maybe a taller, bigger secondary, and then you're going against like a KC who was like loaded back in the day with, say, like a Tyreek Hill in his prime,
sure,
and like Hardman and some other guys, you're basically going to be put in a position where your secondary is going to get torched. I mean, Tyreek Hill would run circles all over you, and so then all the Chiefs would then need to do is keep their tight ends tight and block, and then chuck the ball, 80 yards or 70 yards or 50 yards down the field and go massive chunk yards for huge scores and points. That was literally although not exactly what we saw during the Super Bowl, that was effectively what we saw in the Super Bowl, which was the Eagles' strengths were so much more dominant than the KC weaknesses, which was their offensive line, that they had no chance. There was just no chance for KC to come back in any way, shape, or form. And KC also didn't do themselves any favors. They did not alter their game plan. They did not have any major adjustments. Like, for example, they didn't bring out jumbo sets. Like, so for example, in our group chat, I kept on screaming in there saying, like, bring in a jumbo set. Try to force the run to slow down the pace of the game to try to keep yourselves on the field to start getting some points up. But KC never did any of it. They just kind of kept with the same.
There was no
plan.
Adjustments.
Yeah, it was just the same plan that didn't work.
It's almost, I don't want to say Reed panicked or whoever's calling the plays, but like kind of what Alex was saying earlier, is the run game was non-existent. And then you could say, well, Philly's front, right? But it's also like that run sets up that pass. We all know that, kind of thing, like what you're going to, the jumbo set, or get creative in some way to, because Hunt and Pacheco are no slouches. They are damn good running backs. Mm-hmm. So I was just super surprised to see them not more involved. And it's almost like the Chiefs somewhat panicked and just went like pass heavy.
I did, Angelo. I did give you your praise at the start of the show.
Yeah, we were praising you, dude.
But like I told you, Angelo, even a broken clock is right twice a day. So,
yeah.
but no, I think it is kind of looking how the first couple drives went, and like first play they ran an RPO and got a quick completion to Hollywood Brown, and I either got a first down or got pretty close, and I'm like, okay. And I thought going into the game, Fangio was going to play it similar to how he's played Mahomes in the past, and kind of a top-down coverage, and let the underneath stuff be there more than it would be. And he, to his credit, he didn't do that. He flipped the script and played it, a little different, and not bringing pressure, and playing quarters, and also having the middle zones pretty well covered up. And so, I think Chiefs realized pretty early that stuff's not going to be there, what they initially planned for, and then just didn't adjust,
Yes.
So, and by the time they did try to commit to the run, like the D line was just so in their bag that it like nothing was going to be successful. And like you could see, Josh Sweat, like he knew Joe Thuney would not be comfortable having to sit down in a bull rush at left tackle, which is not something he's naturally played. And, up to this point, most people have tried to just beat him off the edge, and he's at least been technically sound enough to halt that for the play to progress and for the them to execute. But Josh Sweat, like, he did not try to do any finesse moves. He straight just put his face in Joe Thuney's chest plate every single rep. And I mean, you constantly saw him just getting hit back, 3-4 yards into the pocket. I mean, honestly, Mahomes' second pick was not even on Mahomes. Like, Thuney got blown the F up into him, hitting him as he's throwing it. And then, I mean, credit to Zach Bondi. I mean, that was an amazing circus-style catch to get that pick.
Yeah,
the first pick, absolutely on Mahomes. He was flustered and did not realize, they're just sitting in quarters, and
he just chucked it
right there.
He just chucked it.
Yeah.
He saw the deep guy and didn't think that the middle guy would be sitting there.
Yeah.
And I mean, he literally was basically spying Mahomes. Like, he was like, if he runs out here, I'm getting him. If he's going to throw it, I'm following his eyes. And that's, I mean, exactly what happened. Shout out to the white boy brand, though, for getting the pick six.
Well, what about his birthday? It was his birthday during the Super Bowl. You got to got to return pick six on his birthday. Like,
hell of a day for him.
Dude, like, that's pretty spectacular.
Didn't Cooper DeJean fall to pick 42? By the way, didn't he fall in the draft?
Yeah, he was projected first round and felt, because they took two corner. They took Quinyon Mitchell and then DeJean. Pick. Yeah.
I wanted him so bad, and
they've gotten a lot. I mean, that's like you mentioned Howie Roseman, but that's the credit to him. Like, they've gotten a lot of guys that have fallen in drafts for size issues or technique concerns or off the field concerns, and all of them. I mean, Nolan Smith fell.
Yeah.
Jalen Carter fell.
He's got the
DeJean
whole Georgia Bulldogs back there on that defense.
Quinyon Mitchell, people were torn up about because he was out of Toledo, and that guy's like a shutdown corner. Like, I mean, the last 4+ years they've hit on like every draft pick they've had.
I didn't even know they had Josh Sweat, to be honest, until I saw the Super Bowl, and I was like, oh my God, this guy's making a resurgence of his career on the biggest game.
Yeah, it was. I mean, that game was all on the offense. I mean, to the defensive credit, like, they did what I said they needed to do and stop Saquon. And honestly, they didn't really. I mean, it was 24-0 at half, and 10-13 of those points were on the defense. Truly, and the rest was the pick six or throwing the pick, setting them up on the 10, and like, defense played pretty well until it just got to a point where
100%.
There's no hope.
Your D-lineman Wharton,
Stancon's only going to get 57 yards. You'd be like, okay, that would probably be a Chiefs win.
I mean, they had like 14 offensive yards at half. Like, it's just totally just uncharacteristic game, and it's just like they got hit in the mouth and did not adjust and just kept trying to do the same thing. And then once they tried to kind of change it up, it was too late. But
I want to bring in Captain here, but after I just kind of make a quick comment there, Alex, to your point though, the one thing that you didn't mention, and I do think it's worthwhile mentioning, is the Eagles, just as part of my transition there to make sure that I've parlayed the name correctly. In fairness to them and their offensive line held your D-line pretty much at bay for the vast majority, if not the overwhelming majority of that game. And Hurts was able to kind of, brew a cup of coffee back there, or a pot of coffee back there before each and every throw for the most part, which really did help his ability to pick apart coverage. Because you are right, your defense did generally play pretty well, but what you weren't able to do was get defensive line pressure, which is uncharacteristic for your team, which kind of goes to the absolute stud quality of the Eagles' offensive line to be able to keep your D-line at bay like that. Because without that, I don't think the Eagles would have done even close to what they did. They would have had obviously some good defensive scores and some good defensive plays, but the offense wouldn't have been able to allow the defense and defensive line to rest, because they would have gone more 3-and-outs or at least have shorter drives. Captain, what do you think about that?
I'm sorry I was late. I was online getting my Kansas City Super Bowl parade tickets. So I had to. They're really hard to find. So maybe I can have Alex help me out with that.
When's the Raiders had a Super Bowl parade?
I'll tell you what.
Let's hear it.
Yeah, I you know what? This is all about you and your smug shit.
Oh shit.
This is all about you and your smug shit, which is why I am here. Why I am here. Okay. We're not in the Super Bowl. The Raiders did not get their asses kicked like the Smugs did. And I will admit that the fact that you're taking it is a testament, but you've had this coming for a while. And you were saying, well, what about the officials? It really wasn't about the officials. Yeah, it became about the officials like 3 plays in when they had a ticky-tack penalty that was given up again. They had a makeup call a couple plays later on McDuffie, okay? Because they called one an OPI, which was BS, and then they called McDuffie for a makeup call because they said, they're watching us. And this was not about the officials after they figured out that I'm sure that there were people that were saying, no, guys, this ain't happening. But it really was about the fact the defensive line kept smacking Mahomes. The MVP of the game should not have been Jalen Hurts. He was very important in that role, but the MVP of the game was Sweat and Carter and whoever the other 2 guys were that would just kept pounding and pounding and pounding against the Chiefs' offensive line. And that's the way it should have been. They should have said that the defensive line is the reason why the Eagles won that game. Hurts had a great game. The Kansas City defense kept Saquon in check. In fact, I even said on my 3-hour rant after the Super Bowl, or during the Super Bowl, that Saquon could not even get an afterthought, and they kept him in check, and that's a testament to the defense of the Chiefs doing what their job needed to be, okay? But as Richie alluded to, they didn't get any pressure on Hurts. He was able to move around and make the passes as he was able to. He was able to do some checks and run when he needed. In fact, I'm sure that the Hurts probably had more yards rushing than Saquon did when all is said and done, or it was close, okay? And the fact that he was a testament, but they wouldn't have gotten anywhere had they not gotten a pick six that gave him 7 points, another pick that gave him another 7 points, or the 14 points. And again, the fact that the Chiefs got their asses handed to them, and Kermit Darlene was on the sidelines crying because, again, he just like Tom Brady, when you hit him and you piss him off and you get him all pissy, he plays like crap. He couldn't throw to the players. He kept throwing in the dirt. He was a shell of himself.
Catherine,
I think that.
Hold on. I do think there is a difference between Mahomes and Brady. I'm not disagreeing with you. I just think there is a slight difference between Mahomes and Brady. Brady got flustered very quickly, almost immediately when he was getting hit. The one credit that I will give to Mahomes is that he seems to have a longer fuse when it comes to the contacts and getting hit. So, for example, it seems that he's able to withstand that for, I don't know, we'll say a quarter longer than Brady was able to when he was playing. But if it's consistent like it was with the Tampa Bay Super Bowl and with the Eagles Super Bowl, Mahomes, just like Brady, you're correct 100% in that analysis, crumble because they don't adjust and they're not demanding or commanding major changes to the offense in order to protect themselves.
to your knowledge, because we can't see all that's going on, but I'm pretty sure that I've seen on the sidelines when Mahomes gets pissy, and it's just like when Brady gets pissy. You say he maybe held out for a quarter longer. We don't know that. I really think that if you even see what Mahomes was doing, how was it like 4, 3 and out? Okay, technically, I think their first play they got a first down, so it seemed like a 3 and out, but they had 4 3 and outs with no yardage after that first play that was the check down RPO, if I'm not mistaken. I'm sure Alex will be amenable to that, but they couldn't get on track, and you could see on the sidelines, maybe he held it in check a little bit longer, but he was pissed because he was throwing in the dirt behind receivers and over their heads and into coverage. And it was wonderful. And yes, I am gloating. Yes, I admit it. I am gloating. And I did gloat for the 3 hours that I had on my show on Sunday. I was waiting for Alex to come on, but he knew better. He knew that I would be a bit full of myself. But to his credit, he stayed away. But well, of course, and that's why I sent that email today and said, "Oh well, there is nothing, no wild horses that are keeping me off of this show today." Okay, me, sleet, hail, rain, or snow, nothing will keep the appointed bounds of Captain Jack from gloating on the Wild Wild West show when Kansas City Smugs get their asses kicked. But I will say, and I have a testament that Angelo did have a chance to talk with you immediately after the game, and he said that you took it like a champ, that you owed up to the fact that it was not a great game for Kansas City. But the other thing that I did hear, the same mantra from Kansas City Chiefs fans across the board that I've spoken to, let me get correct English, spoken to, was that it's not all the officials. And, we were still 15-2. Well, I keep saying that at least 1/3, if not 1/2 of those 15 wins was as a direct result of the results that we were talking about. And it's not just Raider fans, Alex, as I've stated in other shows. It's not Raider fans that are calling out the Kansas City Smugs. It's the entire NFL fan base. Because I heard Eagles fans and Saints fans and Panthers fans, and I can go on and on and on. When it becomes noticeable from the 31 other fan bases, it feels good as a Raiders fan. It's not just us. They not like us. They not like us. They not like us. That's what it is. Okay, is everybody could see it, and I do think that somebody said from on high to the crew, and I will give credit to Ref Guru when he said that when Torber's crew was announced, that across the board that they are non-favorites per se to the Kansas City cause. Yes, it was good that they got the Eagles. It was good for the Eagles that the Eagles smacked them in the mouth, because that defense, the lines, the offensive line and the defensive line were the stars of that game. Okay. Oh yeah, I'm sorry, Dreamweaver. I threw a wild card at you. But,
someone liked the halftime show.
I gotta keep I gotta keep it real, But no, it was a rather enjoyable Super Bowl for me, Alex. My question is, and it's a question across the line, is what will happen in Great Smugsville? Now that the mighty Casey has struck out, to almost paraphrase an old poem, what's going to go on? Because the mantra was already shown a couple years ago when the Bucks destroyed the Tampa Bay Bucks destroyed the Kansas City offensive line, and they went out and they got 2 tackles. And it was shown again that if you destroy the Kansas City offensive line, and you have people on the back end that can cover the receivers a hell of a lot better than other people have been able to. And without the help of officials, because that plays an important part in it as well, what will be happening to the great and powerful Oz in Kansas City from here on out?
Well, I mean, I don't think they're going to be dismantled or go away.
That's an open-ended question. I'm sorry, I kind of,
I understand where you're going. I understand where you're going.
Yeah, I'm doing all right. More food for the hamster, I suppose.
Okay, I saw Spencer. Go ahead. Yeah, the hamsters are tired on my end. I'm sorry. I need to reboot.
Yeah.
But
so Alex, what are your thoughts on Captain's question? Obviously, given the fact that it directly impacts your team, we did somewhat touch base on that in terms of your thoughts in the show last week. But what are your thoughts after now seeing the results?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think I said this in our little text thread too, but I think the loss is in the long run going to be a blessing in disguise, because they're going to have to take a hard look at retool. I mean, after Tampa Bay, right? Everyone said there's the blueprint. You just got to get pressure with 4, play back, and make Mahomes make mistakes. And then, like you said, Cap, what did KC do? They went and got 3 new offensive linemen right after that, and then that's pretty much been the line outside of a rotation at left tackle up to this point, and the same thing happened. So I mean, they just let the line get back to the point it was in Tampa Bay, but I truly believe that they see the writing on the wall. They see what needs to be done. They have 28 pending free agents. I'm sure are going to let a good chunk of them walk, and get a left tackle, whether that's through signing someone. Because I believe that if they had just a competent left tackle, someone that they could trust at that position to let Tooney be inside, things would have looked different. Am I going to say Kansas City would have won? No, because of how dominant of a performance that was. But I think that looking at how they played the Eagles in the prior Super Bowl, when they had Orlando Brown Jr. at left tackle, but at least was someone they could trust to remotely block. They held, this defense to 0 sacks when they were 1 shy of beating the 85 Bears season total record. And so, that's the big hole in the offensive line at this, unless they don't bring Trey Smith back, but that's, part of the equation as well. But I truly think that if they would have won and, did the three-peat, it would have been the approach they've taken after the last 2 Super Bowls in this little run, where they basically just re-signed everyone and maybe add 1 veteran piece on the offensive side of the ball just for like a little flash. But for the most part, it's been the same roster. And now I think, after Tampa Bay, we saw them do a draft, like they let Honey Badger walk and got Justin Reed. They revamped the offensive line. They signed, a couple receivers. So like, I think that's what we're going to see more in this offseason. Right now I think they're like at 12 million in cap, but like Mahomes, Kelsey, potential retirement, Chris Jones all have big numbers, and I can see them being
I think
more.
The majority of your cap is in with like 5 or 6 players.
Yeah, it's mostly Mahomes, Kelsey, and Jones. And Kelsey, I mean, I'm pretty convinced Kelsey's retiring, which is fine, because he it's not been the best of years for him, and I think it's just close to time. And he's got plenty of other things going on, and he's had a hell of a career. It's certainly to a point where he's not worth the 19 million. As much as that pains me to say as a Chiefs fan, and for what he's done, he is not the same guy in terms of what he could do. So, I think that if you listen to his podcast, it's the way he talked, it sounded pretty like he's, 80% I'm retiring, 20% like, man, I want to go again. But
dude, the film that came out on him
please,
during the game looks bad.
retire.
Well, and the thing that I didn't get, and I wish I knew more of the dynamics of like how much of the input and what they do offensively is like Matt Nagy's suggestions. How much of it is it all Andy Reid? Like, what is he given credence to in the game plan? But they got to a point where they were trying to have Kelsey like chip the edge and then just quickly like get a dump off pass to him. But like Mahomes, even with that, didn't have enough time to see it. And then it's like, why did they not go off of that? Like, why did they not like make him just stay in and block or just have him run out to the flat? Like, it was just, again, like you could tell that they got stunned and did not adjust in any way. They just stuck to their game plan and, did not really adjust things until it was too late. But again, like Cap, yeah, I think that this whole thing is going to be a blessing in disguise. Like, I mean, I will never say that Kansas City is not going to be a contender with Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, just because, I mean, history, like they have been relevant since he's been there. So it's hard to not have confidence in them figuring it out to right the ship. Because again, I mean, after they lost to Tampa Bay, everyone thought the same thing, that they were done. And, there's the blueprint. Everyone's going to beat them now. And, then they lose Tyreek, and again, they're done. And they've gone on this run, and they've figured out ways to do that. And I trust that Brett Veach and Andy Reid are going to take a hard look at the roster, and we're going to see some big changes, in how this team looks next season.
Well, I also think that Andy Reid, pending upon what the Chiefs do in 2025, okay, if they can get a bounce back year, and normally it takes two, because remember, after you lost the Super Bowl, the Bengals were the AFC representative, because it usually, when you lose the Super Bowl, you're not even going back, you're not even as good as you were. And the Chiefs were decent that next year, but they were nowhere near the pillar of what took them to that Super Bowl.
They were in the AFC
I think that it's going to, but they didn't go.
No, I hear you.
And I think that it's going to be a year like that. Maybe
quiet, please.
Because again, you have a donkey team that's reserved. You have a gargler team that, if they can get out of their own way, can be a representative. Yeah, I got something for you here, D said. I'm picking my nose your way, brother. There you go. I'll even flip the booger your way. That there is, again, and it's going to take the Raiders a year or three to get back to prominence. But I think it's going to be where the Chiefs don't. They're not going to be as good. But again, I even think that Kelsey retiring will be better for the Chiefs. Again, get rid of that money. And the kid that's their second tight end actually plays better than Kelsey and has been the last couple of years. Horn, I think, is his name.
Gray. Noah Gray.
Gray.
Sorry,
they signed him to a 3-year deal over this year.
Yeah, he's solid.
Smart move.
Yeah.
So Gray is a solid player, but Gray is a solid player and certainly slightly above average. But if you're being honest and fair, he is not a Kelsey. He is not a game changer
Kelsey.
No, I agree. But but that's my point, right? Is that Kelsey's basically, statistically speaking, at, near, or beating Gronk in terms of those stats categories. So it's
the damn Raiders now are going to have that name.
Yeah, and exactly. Bowers is going to start being that kind of next guy, in my opinion. At the tight end position, because he's proven that he's kind of got that it factor going on now. And the question is, can you guys find him a proper quarterback in order to kind of maximize those opportunities and get him into postseason games, not just lingering in the regular season? Because having those extra 2 and 3 games, depending on how you get into the playoffs and whatnot, make a tremendous amount of difference in terms of your career statistics. and often will make the difference between you having Hall of Fame numbers and not. And that's where Kelsey's been at in his career, is that he's been fortunate enough to play with Mahomes and Andy Reid to get himself into that postseason on an absolute regular basis.
No, I mean, it definitely would be a dip.
I would when I was kind of, and I kind of lost the train, and I apologize. I think that Andy Reid is going to see this next year as maybe this is my get out the door year. Not that he's going to retire, but I think this might be that transition year for him where he says, yeah, I went to the mountain, went to the pinnacle. I won 3 times. And I'm going to turn it over to insert name here. And that's what my other question to Alex is.
2 organizations?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Both.
Yeah, because he's definitely the winningest Eagles coach. Yeah. And I know he's the winningest Chiefs coach.
Yeah. So think about any other like coaching records that he might need to break. Other than maybe it's Lombardi, right? Or
because I get
well,
he's got what 300 some career wins.
Yeah, and that's it. You know, Belichick is going to stay at North Carolina for a few years, and then I don't think Bill Belichick needs to figure out that he is that guy, and he's getting his gold jacket whenever he needs to. You know, I don't think that he needs to have that affirmation that, well, I'm not the winningest head coach, you know, Don Shula is. But when you think of the head coaches that take teams as dynasties, you actually always think of Belichick in that phrase. You don't think of Lombardi. You don't think of Shula because Shula only went to a couple Super Bowls. Now Shula took the Colts and the Dolphins to Super Bowls, but he wasn't really successful. He just had an accumulation of wins. Okay, yeah. So Belichick doesn't have to worry about, well, I don't have the record. Okay, and my name's not on a trophy.
I agree with that. The one thing Belichick does have to deal with, though, and it's a legitimate issue, I think, in his legacy, if you're going to be quite honest, is that after the loss of Tom Brady, when Tom Brady left, he didn't sustain success. In fact, if anything, Tom Brady showed that he could sustain success on another roster with another team, obviously winning that Super Bowl there. Whereas Belichick was a shell of himself in terms of his system, what he was able to accomplish, etc. And so I think that the one thing that Belichick's going to have to weigh very carefully in terms of the way he looks back at things is his legacy in the NFL. Is he going to be seen truly as the architect of the dynasty, or is he going to be seen as the head coach that capitalized and maximized because of Tom Brady and what Tom Brady was able to do on the field? Because Tom is the one that really came out ahead between the two of them, especially in the back end of their career as they both agreed to part ways. And that's just a fact. Like there's, you might not like Tom and whatnot. I will say that Tom Brady is certainly far more likable now than he has ever been when he was with the Patriots. He's making some comments and coming out with some rather harsh words for the NFL that I actually agree with.
Same.
Which is great because, you always wondered, is that real? Like, he's so hyper competitive and you can see it. He's got that like anger and fire when he was on the field, but then he came on and like started talking like he was Leave It to Beaver. And it was just like, dude, these two things don't square. Like, like, come on. And
it's crazy from a guy who couldn't stand Tom Brady. Now he's like an owner of the team, and now I'm happy he's here. It's such a weird reversal on that. And I do see, Alex, and I disagree with Cap on this. I see Andy Reid staying in the league for probably another 3 years because he's not that far off from Shula. So, he's at 301 wins. I think Shula is at 347. So you've got to figure 17 games a season.
That's
he could be number one of all time.
And I think, he's, as long as Mahomes is around, I mean, he's got an incentive to stick around. Like, he's got guy, the quarterback he wants to work with, right? So
speaking of Mahomes, do you know who Mahomes reminded me of this year?
Mahomes?
The guy he replaced.
yeah,
Alex Smith.
Yeah.
I was talking about that with someone, that
He
it
was
seemed the
not
past couple
Mahomes-ish.
years. Yeah, he's Andy Reid slowly turned him into just like a take what the defense gives you QB. Don't take any, don't take any flashy aggressive attempts.
Yeah.
And then it's like, later in the game, like you see him just throw the 70-yard
He'll have
FU
one
bomb.
or two, but yes, he
And
has
it's
like
like,
one or two plays.
Dude, when he threw that to Worthy, I was like, why the hell have we not done this like 8+ times a game? Like, why have we not
Right.
tried this? Like,
those
No,
are the
Considering
games
that
he-
no,
Eagles
No,
in
the rear.
and third string at that point, and that they didn't have the same pass rush and they didn't have the same guys in the back, it's a lot easier to chuck a ball 50 yards when you don't have the coverage or the guys that are pushing up into you.
I mean,
I mean,
don't
honestly,
think it was
Alex,
total
I
backups.
didn't want the Eagles to score. I mean, I didn't want the Chiefs to score, and I was pissed that they gave up that easy pass, but I had to look at what their roster was, and it was the fact that Sirianni said, well, we're going to let all of our team play because we could afford to do that. We were up that high that everybody can honestly say, yes, I played in Super Bowl 59 when we kicked the Chiefs' ass. And that ring is just not that you were there because you were on the team. No, I actually got a chance to play. Granted, it was in garbage time, but they can still say, yes, I played.
Yeah, it was not their. Just because they put Kenny Pickett in, it was not their. Yeah, it was their first round corner, and it was more the fact that Mahomes threw a perfect ball that only Worthy could catch. That I'm like, why the hell are they not taking shots like this? Throughout this season, not even just in the game. I just told you who it was, Cap. It was Quinyon Mitchell. They're starting all-rookie corner.
Who was rushing? Who was rushing at the time?
Okay, but it's not all their backups.
No, it was their starters.
It was their starters. Just because Kenny Pickett went in the game does not mean all their JV squad was out there. That's not true.
Okay.
So again,
okay.
I was saying, why didn't they take more shots throughout that game?
But yeah, that's just saying it. That's the epitome of how he's turned into Alex Smith, to DZ's point. Like he's stopped taking these uber aggressive throws, and he's just tried to pump these check downs and quick screens and take what the defense gives you. And I think that's why I think this is going to be a big blessing in disguise. I hope they fire Nagy and bring in a different offensive mind and try to, get back to that way. Now that they know, like, Worthy could be a Tyreek Hill level player, in my opinion. He had the quietest 157-yard 2-touchdown performance of any player ever.
Worthy and Wharton were the best players on that Chiefs team during the Super Bowl.
So Alex, I actually have a question directly piggybacking off of the kind of the comment / question Captain asked there. You have a handful of guys on your defensive line which are well above average in terms of performance and have had for a number of years. Your issue as a team right now is that you have knocked it out the park when it comes to your defensive linemen, because you have in some regards an embarrassment of riches as it stands right now in terms of defensive linemen that are able to get to the quarterback. Obviously, Eagles game aside, you've typically done very well at that over the course of the entire season. When you look at what you're missing right now on your roster and what it would take for you to have sustained success, do you not think it would be perhaps in your best interest to trade one of those younger guys away while he's on his first-year deal, try to obtain an additional first to attempt to target a left tackle in the upper portion of the first round that you can keep for a long period of time? Because as you said, that is a positional value proposition, is what I'm saying.
They don't have anybody for a first.
Yeah, that's
Pardon me?
They don't
that's
have
the
anybody
problem.
for
I mean, the only person they could trade is Karlaftis that would have any of that value, and
Karlaftis is probably not even a first. He's probably a second and a fourth or something. No offense. I mean that because all their guys have come from so late in the draft. Like their guys are just system dudes that work really well. Like their linebackers to me are their best in that defense, but that's just me.
But yeah, no, I don't disagree with you, Richie, that should be a play, or if some guy falls into the late teens, early 20s. But I could also see them like, Ronnie Stanley or Tyron Smith, which both have their own injury concerns, but I could see that also being a route they take because, like I said, if they had, I think, just a competent left tackle that they could trust that wasn't, second-year player Wanye Morris or rookie Kingsley Sumamatea or DJ Humphreys, who they signed off the street in Week 10, coming off of an ACL injury, and just had someone that they know, hey, whoever it is, like they got their faults, but we know they're competent enough to at least stay in front of someone for 1 to 2 seconds. We can keep Tooney inside. I think things would have looked different. And I think they realized that, and maybe, like Kingsley did have positive signs at times, but at other times looked very much like a rookie. And so, part of it is like how much faith do they have in him taking the next step? There's already talks of them, letting Trey Smith walk and moving him into guard because he actually was like warming up on the sideline to go in at left guard for Caliendo, who was just getting embarrassed. And they for whatever reason, never did it. But I would have done it. Like at that point, like what did you have to lose? It's not going to get any worse than it is. But yeah, I think it'll just be really hard for them to move up, into the realm where you would get a Joe Alt or, someone of that caliber. I guess in this draft would be Will Campbell. But there's a lot of teams that are going to want a guy like that. And, I think it'll just be hard.
Alex,
Alex, I will say this. It's like, that's what you get with success.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
I mean,
100%.
And that's why it's like you got to. I mean, there's got to be a testament to Brett Veach and have faith in him because I mean they've been the epitome of success, like it or not, for this 6-7 year stretch, and he's continued to find ways to make moves to get pieces that have been huge contributors. Whether that's trading up to get McDuffie, knowing the Bills were going to take McDuffie, and you got your number one corner, and then you can let Snead walk. And so it's, that's just going to be the fun part to watch as a fan this offseason. Like, who are they going to value to keep? Who are they going to let walk? Who are they going to value as free agency? And what's the aggressive move he's going to try to take to get a difference maker? And what position is that going to be? Because they have what I think four or five picks in the first 3 rounds. So, I mean, he's got plenty of ammo to work with. Yeah, because of the Snead trade. The Hopkins trade. They've gotten these picks to move up. So, I mean, he's got ammo to work with.
Yeah, you've got good ammo then to get that line help that you need.
Yeah, but the issue that, and I'm not going to disclose what we actually spoke about in other instances, but I'll disclose what I said in our group chat, which was, the challenge that we end up with in the NFL, and this is just statistically proven, and there's no arguing it. There are a select few positions are on an NFL roster, which simply put, the talent can only be found and are typically only attained in like the top 12 picks of the first round of the NFL draft. Actually, 15. I'll expand it to 15 because you can get some starters into pick 15, depending on how heavy the draft is in that positional group. So we'll give it to the top 15. Either way, the point is it has to be in the top half of the draft. Otherwise, don't bother. You're probably not getting your guy, right?
Yeah,
So left tackle is absolutely one of them. in today's NFL, right tackle is almost absolutely one of them, almost beyond a shadow of a doubt. Although you can get some rare flyers that end up dropping for random reasons, but generally speaking, again, just by numbers, right tackles in that same group. And then elite level D tackles at rushing the passer typically are also only found in that top kind of 15
rushers,
picks,
yeah.
or even edge rushers, right? And then you can get into some flyers that exist in other rounds. And then a quarterback is also one that kind of fits in that same general mold for the most part, where your guy is typically only found in the top 15, generally speaking. Rare exceptions exist, but to be fair, if you're going to be honest, you're talking kind of those 4 position groups that really, outside of that early first round, there are rare exceptions, but you don't operate a franchise. But you don't operate a franchise off of I hope I find a flyer that works. You need to operate your franchise off of, I need the thing, therefore I need to find a way of getting the thing.
At least at those.
Yeah,
I mean,
at
the
least
later
at those
rounds are
positions.
the later rounds are more for traits and project players, things like that.
Are just tangibles that you can work with.
Right.
But that's
right.
That's why I say that if they just
back.
had a competent left tackle, because when you look at, like, every year Mahomes has been the starter, he's had a different left tackle. Or maybe Orlando Brown was in there for 2, but I mean, pretty much through his 7-8 year stretch, he's had 7 different left tackles, and they've found ways, I mean, obviously, to win the ultimate title with those people. Like, last year one with Donovan Smith, who was like consistently the worst graded left tackle in the NFL. Year before that, held the Eagles defense to 0 sacks with Orlando Brown, who, got a huge payday with Cincinnati and is now talked about as a liability. but like I say that, like, they've been able to make it work, is knowing they have that core of Tooney, Humphrey, Smith, and kind of Jawan Taylor, I guess, but just getting someone competent enough to play the position to where they don't have to move the rest of the pieces. Like, it's shown to be a pretty efficient and effective offensive line. So that's why part of me thinks they're not going to sell the farm to get their, guy of the future, unless someone drops a little bit that they're really high on. But I don't, in today's draft, eras, it doesn't, like, tackles don't drop all that much. Like, I mean, what we saw 3 or 4 last, in the top 15.
You're not going to get one at 31. If you want,
I know
a solid left tackle. Yeah.
I don't know if you guys have ever
have to move up.
kind of what you just said, Alex, about the 7-8 years of Mahomes left tackles. I don't know if any of you guys have heard this, but when a new coach goes into a new job, right? They say, this is what coaches have said, and I've heard top coaches say this, their most important hire is not the OC, not the DC, but it's the offensive line coach.
Yeah.
That is supposedly the most important hire. A lot of the top great coaches, if you're to ask them, like, hey, who do you go and what do you look for when you're building a coaching staff? They go for offensive line coach, which that kind of makes me think about KC, because what they've had success with these quote unquote subpar left tackle kind of guys. And then you see him, like you said, in get paid big money, go to Cincy, and now there's talks are like, oh man, we know Burrow, he gets sacked like every other play, it seems.
Yeah, no, and that's why it's but then they also have, like, Trey Smith, a pending free agent, who can get arguably reset the guard market, this offseason with the team.
I don't know his performance, man.
That's what I'm saying.
Has to come down a little bit.
Like I said last week, Trey Smith, you want to get paid. This is your game to show. This is the game to go earn it. And they played bad. And
maybe he wants to stay in KC.
Maybe, and I would welcome that. Like, I think they should prioritize signing Trey Smith and just finding a competent left tackle because they're not going to be able to get up high enough to get someone for the future unless someone falls, and I don't see that. But really,
I mean, right now it's Ronnie Stanley, and like you said,
Tyron Smith, like,
and
that's it.
They made like 7.5 mil and 6.5 mil this last season. So the question is, with all those free agents, are you going to have the money to do it? But I can see one of these guys at the end of their career, especially like Smith, going, "Hey, this is probably it," and then coming over on the cheap just to try to get that ring.
Yeah, but then, it's like both of those guys are definitely the top, options in free agency, but both have injury concerns. So it's like, does that even solve your problem? Like, we all know Tyron Smith, hell of a left tackle, like hell of a career, but he's really only good for like 8 games, if that, in a season. And that just puts you in the same situation. So, it's certainly not a good time to need a left tackle.
Nope.
But I have to have faith in Veach.
Cam Robinson to take less. He made like 18 million last year. You get him to take less.
I mean,
there's
they're gonna do something, and the freedom in what they do is gonna depend on if they, re-sign Smith, and if Tooney restructures, or Mahomes restructures, or if Kelsey retires, that's 17 mil in cap space right there. So they're going to make moves to have plenty more cap space. It's just like, who are they going to value to bring back, and what, how aggressive are they going to be? What position are they going to target in the draft, and how aggressive are they going to be to fill that hole?
We have to pay our
7 or 8 million, for your rookie class too.
Yeah.
We have to pay our left tackle this offseason.
You do.
And it was it's kind of eerie, like, for some of the fans that kind of look into things a little differently. They really they didn't talk about it much. They didn't talk about paying him. They didn't talk about contracts or anything like that. They were just talking more about getting the guys they signed and getting them back. Yes, Slater, correct.
Yes.
He's going to reset the market, obviously, because he's just going to be the newer guy to sign this year and then somebody else the next year. But we're all assuming that they're just going to sign him, and it's all going to be gravy. So I hope that's the case. But, man, if there's like a piece of me, there's a little part of me that could see him maybe test free agency. And I would be devastated, but it's not like they don't have a guy that they
you gotta sign.
Can they tag him?
Yeah, I think they could. They could tag him, but we don't. I mean,
maybe
we have the money.
Trade.
We have the money to tag him too. So, but I just hope they get it done, worked out. They have the money to do it, and I heard he wants to stay there, but you never know. I mean, look, I'm sure Kansas City looks pretty enticing for a lot of people too. So it'd be like.
Well, I don't know, man. Like, you say that, but it's not like all the free agents come flocking to KC, So it'll be interesting to see.
There's just like that little piece of me that's like, God, please, I hope this isn't some bigger issue than, you know what I mean? I hope I'm just being a hypochondriac or something. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
because they just want to get. The whole talk was getting Mack back, Khalil Mack. They want Khalil Mack back more than anything. And they made a promise to him about, hey, you're going to play deep, into January. That didn't work out. Well, now what do you say to him now? This guy has never won a playoff game in his career. And what do you do? Like, what do you say to him now to keep him, to bring him back to LA? Or does he go chase with another organization?
That's kind of crazy to think that Max never won a playoff game. I mean, he's so good.
Dude, he is a great human. And a great
football
player. I guess
they lost that one when he was in Chicago.
Yeah,
he lost it, when he was on the Raiders too. 2016.
He is loved, and I know Raider Nation loves him.
He's good, dude.
And
I mean, he's
just
a beast.
He's just a football player. Let's just say that he's a football player.
And he's from Buffalo, so it's like he kind of like he had to grind for where he's at.
And he said that. So he was like talking about like, okay, am I going to retire? Am I going to play? It already came out. He's like over the retirement talks. So now it's like, all right, let's see. Like, and he's going to go. Is he going to go mercenary mode? Because this is his last shot to get the bag. Yeah.
He might. You just never know because he is that type of guy. You know what I mean? He's a football player, and
to Paul Schaefer's point, that was the old regime, dude.
Ring.
Yeah.
Yes, he does. He doesn't have a playoff win, so like they promised him. Harbaugh came in and was like, "We'll be playing, deep into it," and it was looking like that until they ran into that buzzsaw of Houston, and that's what kind of reminded me of the Eagles Chiefs. I had flashbacks of our Houston. That was the same thing, man. It was like that perfect storm. You just ran into a team that it just punched you and you could not counterpunch at all. I mean, that's like I know it's two different stages, wild card round, Super Bowl, but that's what it felt like when we played Houston. And then I watched you guys the Super Bowl and I was like, I know how Chiefs fans feel right now.
Just totally uncharacteristic game.
No, but it's not so much uncharacteristic. It's a matter of who you have on your roster and how they match up against the other team and their strengths. As an example, in our division, when we were all chasing the Chiefs to try to catch up to them when they had Tyreek Hill, so I mean that quite literally, the dude's just lightning fast. Right. We had to then bolster our secondaries, our cornerbacks, in order to account for a speedster like Tyreek Hill. And there is also a bunch of other players that the Chiefs had, like Kelsey, that we had to then bolster our linebacking cores and or safeties, right?
Nichols or whoever, yeah.
Nichols, exactly. And so we all had to do certain things to our roster if we ever wanted to compete against the Chiefs in that current iteration of their team. The problem is, though, and we ran into this as well, is then you start going up against a Baltimore or a Pittsburgh Steelers at the time, or the Bengals or the Lions, like kind of what they've kind of evolved into over these past few years. And you're getting big-bodied, mauler-type offensive linemen, really aggressive D linemen, and then you end up with this problem where you built your team to stop speed, but then you go up against a team that's built to just maul you like bears, and you can't stop them. You're like, you can block out of a wet paper bag is basically what the problem becomes there.
Look at the weight difference between, Philadelphia and Kansas City. I mean, I think they got over like 140 pounds, more as a whole.
Eagles O-line? Eagles O-line?
Okay, guys, I actually have the stats on this one because I was wondering if this was going to come up. Okay. The average height of the Eagles offensive line is 6'6". The average.
Shit.
Okay.
Yeah.
The average weight of the Eagles offensive lineman, and this is an average, so this is like across the board, is 336 pounds.
Yeah, Beckman actually added a lot.
Well, you got to think that Mulata's 6'8" and 340 or something ridiculous.
And Mekhi Becton is a free agent as well for the Eagles, and he's like 6'7" and 3 grocery stores.
Yeah. He's huge.
That's wild.
But this is the point, though, right? Is that when you draft well and get guys that are mobile and can move and are that size, which is what we've discussed on this show several times, certainly Alex and I have for the last couple of years, which is the offensive linemen now that are coming out from college are coming into the league at, the left tackles and the right tackles and even some of the guards now are coming in able to run at clips that were unheard of 10 years ago, just like as in a pipe dream for these dudes. And on top of that, they're like 6'6", 6'7", and 320, 30, 40, 50 pounds. And you're looking at this and saying, I don't understand. A dude that size should not be able to run that quickly. Like they don't jive. Like the math doesn't math.
I mean, you can look at I think they said a stat during the Super Bowl of like the first Super Bowl average height and weight of the O-line compared to now.
100 pounds
it's like
more.
100 pounds more. So
it was like 245.
It's insane.
Average weight.
The evolution in human being is absolutely bananas.
Hey, I'm almost that.
And we could get into conspiracies and foods and that whole thing.
Well, it's genetics and now you got trainers, out there, these professional trainers. It's a
dietitians. They know to eat
sport,
right.
not a part-time thing.
Creatine, they pump, pumping
all
weights.
The different, things that put on weight. Here's a fun fact. Cap will probably know this. Who's the first 300-pound player in the NFL?
Oh, I know this too. That's I thought he was a D lineman.
I'm gonna call Alzheimer's.
Yep.
I used to know it.
He was a left tackle.
It was a left tackle.
Yep. It was number 78.
He played for the
Washington Redskins. I was going to say
Art Shell.
Art Shell. Yeah.
Play McDonald's.
That's funny.
And who was Art Shell drafted? And what was the reason why Art Shell was drafted?
Wait,
specifically,
who drafted him?
Well, wait, go ahead.
No. Why was Art Shell drafted specifically?
I haven't the slightest.
That's a good question. I don't know.
300 pounds.
Yeah, right.
To take care of the Kansas City guy across from him at the time was like Curly Culp, and the end on Kansas City, he was drafted specifically to block that mofo.
Right.
That's why he was drafted.
Captain, that's exactly what my point though is. It's been all throughout the show, right? It's you're going to counter what your divisional opponents largely have on their rosters as well.
Mm-hmm.
And Kansas, right? Like you're just going to, like you have to, because the road to the playoffs for you in the AFC West is to try to beat your other AFC West opponents. Because if at least you get a spot in the dance,
you don't beat your division, you don't go nowhere.
Right, exactly, and that's exactly
you got to beat your division first.
Right. And so you're going to aim to beat your division first, and then you're going to then look to go bigger. Now, Kansas City has had the benefit of winning the division consistently over these past years, and they've actually started to shift their team a little bit more from the pure speed model because they started to run up against buzzsaws when they were playing these really challenging, I mean, just there's no other way of putting it, bulkier, beefier teams like the Ravens and the Steelers and all those guys I mentioned. And also, it's also why they mightily struggled when they played the Bengals, because the Bengals are playing that style of football too. And the Chiefs are like, man, who are these dudes? Because they really put them through the ringer because the D linemen were so much stronger.
Cujo. Right.
Was that Denver?
I think all of our teams are going trenches after that Super Bowl.
I mean, the whole league's going to look that way.
Well, it's great for D tackles in this draft. I think I've heard there's 24 of these guys that could be starters in the league. And so, like, I know, like, for Charger fans, everybody's like, we need to get Justin weapons. I think that they're going to do exactly what they did last year in the draft, and they're going to get a trench guy, and then the next best available weapon if he's there or whatever. So I think a lot of us are going to do that. I just don't know anything about the O-linemen in this draft. Kind of going to Alex, like needing O-line help. I don't know about any O-linemen in this class that look good or whatever. So
that'll come out. These when you get into the Indianapolis runs, then you will start hearing about those guys. And once they come out of Indy, then you will follow them to their pro day, and then you know a little bit more about them. Because again, like you, we only know the people that have been pushed to us, throughout the year. And it's just you can get, now that the Super Bowl is over. Oh, I'm sorry. Now that the Super Blowout is over, had to do that. Gonna get that. And by the way, I'm gonna say this, Alex, and I mean it sincerely. That was wonderful to watch, obviously. But people bring it up to the fact that the Raiders got blown out in their last Super Bowl. But I will also say that the Raiders weren't playing their former head coach, who knew more about the team that they were playing than the team that he was coaching. So
forgot about the Sirianni connection.
Yeah,
So, yeah,
the excuse
Tampa
was
like calling out the plays, going up to Jerry Rice, going, "Oh, you're going to run this pattern."
right, exactly. So that was a main reason why. I have other than Nick Sirianni having started his career in Kansas City, he really didn't have that much knowledge of the team that he was going up against as a whole. Okay. He started as that guy in KC, but he was so far removed from that I don't think it was anything close
he got
to having
fired
your
once Reed came in.
Sorry?
He was a Charger too.
He was
got
fired as soon as Reed came in.
on. Yeah, he was with the old staff. He was with Todd Haley's staff.
Right. So that the point made is that Sirianni has really nothing to do with the team that he was facing, whereas Gruden knew more about the Raiders he was facing than his own Buccaneer team. So I bring it to you that when you get your ass whooped by somebody that didn't have inside information, it should hurt more.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're also telling me that when it was 2002, it's 2025 now, and you haven't been back since, and the Chiefs have been 5 times since then. I mean,
okay. Hey, I just keep up with current events as of Sunday.
Fun fact about that 02.
But then you're talking about 2002, so
that was the largest.
No, I'm just saying. I'm keeping up with current events as of Sunday. The ass whooping that occurred on Sunday, not the one that occurred 20-something years ago.
22 years.
Sure. I guess where I would come at from the Broncos' perspective is all of our teams are aspiring to at least make it to the Super Bowl.
Please God, in my lifetime.
Which would be something to kind of make note of. And so I'm looking at it from the Broncos' perspective, having been 9 years ago and legitimately struggling almost every season thereafter. Coming from a franchise like the Broncos that is traditionally a winning one and having not won very much as a result of John Elway and his piss poor ability to draft NFL players. I would like to see my Denver Broncos return to a Super Bowl with the style of drafting that Sean Payton is going through right now with George Payton, which is more trenches, more sustainability, and less flash. A cornerback is great, but you actually need linemen in order to, get the ball to, a wide receiver, for example. John Elway kind of forgot that, I guess, when he was playing and drafted nothing but wide receivers and corners.
That would be like the first thing you'd want to touch.
Right. You would think, but unfortunately, John Elway missed that memo. Perhaps it was when he was busy drinking on his little moped there. Maybe he fell, hit his head. I don't know. Either way, it was not good.
To your point, whoever was, wasn't it DZ that brought up? And again, I will say DZ in deference to the host because I like the way that sounds other than DZ too. It does sound better for a Canadian hey type thing. The person that made the mention about the most important hire on a coaching staff nowadays is who the offensive line coach is. And I'm sure you guys know that Pete Carroll's son is the offensive line coach for the Raiders, having spent his college career at I can't remember which university just recently. So he has the head coaching experience from college and is the offensive line coach. And maybe that is the guy he's going to hand off to in a couple years when Pete says, I've had enough. I'm just saying because I don't know about that. I certainly hope that it's not our OC, who's a fantastic OC, but is the most horrible head coach and on record, other than Josh McDaniels as a head coach.
There are a lot of people.
There are a good number of excellent offensive coordinators and a good number of excellent defensive coordinators. And once they are elevated to become the CEO of the team, find out very quickly that they suck at it.
Yeah,
and
fire.
And I think that's an important lesson for some of these guys, which is these guys are often, No, Fangio was actually a pretty good head coach, in my opinion. I just think that he didn't have the supporting cast around him in order to maximize the team. If you actually
that
look
might
at,
be true. And no disrespect for Vic Fangio, because people were saying what his record was against the Chiefs all those times. I said, well, you got to remember that he was playing he was the DC for a lot of those times against the Chiefs, and he was only Denver's head coach for maybe four of those, or
no. Fangio was the head coach for the entire time when he was here with the Denver Broncos, completely.
And here's the crazy thing,
However, the issue that Fangio had is that he had effectively an unfireable general manager because there was no actual ownership when Fangio came in. It was the trust that was running the show here in Denver. In my opinion, I think that would have been a better, I would have loved to have seen Fangio come in with the Walton Penner ownership group, where he had a general manager and everything on the table in terms of options and things like that. Because I actually think that Fangio is an old school football coach. He believes in those old school fundamentals. And I would have liked to have seen him get a fair shot at a head coaching gig in a team with ownership group that would potentially trust in him and kind of build around him, as well as a general manager that isn't this like unfireable, vaunted name within the organization that nobody wanted to really, push out the door. And he only
things are looking up for the Donkeys.
Now Elway's finally been pushed out the door.
So you look at Fangio, and it's kind of the trend in the NFL. It's like, Fangio he's phenomenal at what he does. He's phenomenal. I mean, we just saw what he did. So like when he was on Denver, it's like when you don't win games, defensive guys that are head coaches get fired. Offensive coordinators that are head coaches, they fire the defensive coordinators and bring someone else in. It's just a trend of the NFL, and it's wrong because Fangio, when he was on your squad, dude, his side of the ball, it looked good.
Yes, I agree.
I felt like 2 years ago. I know we're talking about Fangio. I heard this thing about Fangio that his tree, right? A lot of teams were running that Fangio system, and then there was talk about, well, his system's been figured out. And so these people that are calling his system, they were already figured out. OCs knew how to deal with it. But then when he calls it, it's like this whole other ball of wax. So it's like these people weren't interpreting his system entirely or to the 100th percentile it needed to be at. And I want to say that was...
You know the reason for that, though, right?
Well, I'm going to get to that. I don't know the exact reason, but I know that Staley tried to run that in with the Chargers,
but he didn't.
But he over freaking complicated it. And then I want to say the Dolphins as well were running some type of Fangio defense, and they showed flashes of great defense, but it was never consistent. But then when Fangio was doing it in Denver when he was the head coach, and then obviously we just saw in the Super Bowl right now. But it's like nobody else could run his system the way he could. But I felt like I don't know. I don't understand that.
Fangio has a base defense that he plays, which basically prevents the deep pass based on the base style. But the one thing that makes Fangio really unique in the way that he calls his defenses is he mixes in a secondary scheme and will often split the field with the secondary scheme to make it more challenging on the quarterback and allow extra pressure. But more importantly, he does that to allow for perhaps weaker players that can't
Isn't
play
that called
purely.
halves?
No. Well, he's playing halves. He's playing halves, yeah. So it is technically called halves, but he's playing halves. But then what he's doing is he's having his best guy perhaps play in the same man coverage. But then what he's doing is with the other half of the field with, like, say, a cluster of three guys, he's having them play a different zone style to allow those guys to play to their strength.
When Kansas, guys, did you watch that? When Kansas City had trips on one side and then it was like a rollout with Patrick, and they would have the linebacker just kind of go out in the flat, so he's blocking one of the lanes. And then, if Patrick's actually going to run, well, then he can come back up, and he's only going to get 3-4 yards.
Right.
I mean, it was genius.
But that's exactly the thing, is that Fangio plays the scheme a little bit different. And the problem that you had with Staley and the other guys is they would only implement the base portion of what Fangio did. And then when they tried to implement the other elements, they didn't implement it like a chess player would, which is how Fangio implements those extra wrinkles in the defense. They didn't fully appreciate and understand the nuances as to why Fangio was doing certain things and the reasoning why he was doing certain things. And he was doing it for the same reasons why Bill Belichick did the things he did when he was in New England. He recognized and understood that he was never going to be able to have a perfect group of defensive players on the field that could execute what he actually wanted to do 100% of the time. So what he did was he said, okay, I got a bunch of guys and this is becoming a passing league. So I'm going to have to go into a nickel or dime a lot of my looks, right? How am I going to then be able to better protect against the run when I'm going lighter on the field rather than heavier on the field? Okay, I'm going to intermix a combination of man and zone, and I'm going to play in halves, and I'm going to have a too high or sometimes trips or sometimes quarters or depending on the look. And he intermixes different styles, and he does so with a very direct and meaningful purpose. And for those people that are saying that Fangio is this awful coach and he did all these awful things in Denver, because that's some of the information that it kind of came out of the Broncos, you need to square the round peg in the fact that he had about 5 or 6 players literally quit their teams and or request a trade and followed Fangio to where he went.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Seems like that's what's going on.
Like
Cincy right now.
Like I'm sorry, you just don't get, if the coach is that bad and he's this awful person and oh my gosh, and he's a slave driver and he's basically saying, you're gonna work until you can no longer walk anymore and all that kind of stuff, which is the kind of the narrative that was coming out of Denver. No, he was trying to get you conditioned to a point where you could play so that when you're playing in overtime in the playoffs, you don't look gassed. He was trying to get you to a point that when you played in a game normally, back when NFL players actually hit each other properly, that you could withstand those hits and not be tired by the end of the game. He wanted you to get to the fourth quarter and look like you did or look like the other team does in the first quarter so that you're then hitting harder and can come back and win if need be as the defense. He had a rhyme and reason for it all. I actually agree with that methodology because it puts you in way better shape and it gets your body calloused for the game of football, which is violent by its very nature. And that's why Fangio has been so successful. And that's why most players that are on the defensive side of the ball that are not pansies think that he is one of, if not the best defensive mind in the NFL right now.
Yeah, and the fact that you have Fangio, I'm glad he's gone from the AFC West because Spags is that guy.
Thank you, Cap.
Spags is that guy in the AFC West with Kansas City, and if we could have gotten rid of Spags, and we didn't hire Pete Carroll. Well, that's why I said, hey, Spags? We didn't get Spags. We wanted to interview Spags, but I don't know whether we ever got the permission to. So I guess we figured out, we're going to get –
like after the first round of the playoffs, they shut it down. You can't do an interview. So I'm happy that we brought back Patrick Graham to bring stability, continuity, and keep players happy. Again, we have so many free agents on this defensive squad.
So I haven't talked to Coach about that. Coach, I called that.
What DZ just said, players will follow their coach. And I think a lot of these players would follow him. So I'm glad he's back.
And I think that was perfect for you guys.
Hold on, let's hear DZ here on this.
Captain Jack. I kept saying Coach. I'm sorry. I apologize. Captain Jack. I think last time you were on the show a few weeks ago, I was like, I think the best thing for the Raiders is keeping Patrick Graham. And this is my first time talking to you now. Is they did keep him, and I thought that was probably the smartest move. Like the Raiders organization is firing on all cylinders. It seems like right now. Sorry, and Jack.
No. And for DZ as well, I'm of a mind. Okay, that I'm a firm believer that Pete Carroll went to the leader of the defense, and that would be a certain player by the name of Crosby, and said, "What do you want? Because we want to keep you happy. You are the heart and soul of this defense."
Yeah.
And if Max Crosby wanted to keep Graham, which obviously he should have liked it, then he said, "Okay, we're going to make that happen." And the point is, hey, Space Beast, I'm Coach Psycho. I am actually. When I was coach of the team in England, when I was coaching the Dodd School for both linemen, offensive and defensive, I wore a Howie Long jersey with Psycho across the back. So they started calling me Coach Psycho. I actually have and it's on the other side of the desk. I can actually get it where it says Coach Psycho, coach of the Dragons for that. But anyway,
that was my nickname in high school.
Was Psycho? Yeah,
yep. In football.
But it's keeping the players happy that perform. And now it's just up for those said players to perform under the auspices of what Coach Carroll wants, and then what Coach Graham wants, and making sure that portion of the roster is entertained and keeps along those lines. I actually think that Rob Leonard coming back is very important as well for the Raiders, because if Graham was gone, as long as they had Rob Leonard come back, that is a positive thing there as well.
Yeah. So
okay, Cap.
I would throw up before every game.
Did you look at the roster for the Raiders coaches from this year to last year?
Yeah, it's
like, man. Oh my God, it's so much better. As I was, and again, I put my foot in my mouth, not really, when I said that the Raiders coaching, it's not all about the head coach, it's who the coach brings in. And I had high hopes for the Raiders last year with the plethora of names like Philbin and Ryan and the old coach of the Bengals, who they did absolutely nothing. They did absolutely nothing to help out AP.
Lou Amarillo?
Yeah, they're all gone. They're all gone. Mm-hmm. So that those coaches who were supposed to be a baseline of support for Antonio Pierce ended up being his undoing. And hey, we suck. I was right in my theory that it's not just about the head coach, it's the other coaches that bring in, but they didn't do crap for him. And I like Antonio Pierce as a person to motivate and rah-rah, but rah-rah only takes you to the first play of the game when you get punched in the mouth, and you continue to get punched as an offset to Mike Tyson. Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. Well, the Raiders got punched in the mouth.
Captain, just one comment on that, because I don't disagree with your comment that who your coach brings in is incredibly important. However, what's also important is whether or not your head coach has the humility to follow the advice of those that have also been brought in as well, and also doesn't put his foot in his mouth when he does things on the team, and both in public, because he's done that a couple times in several pressers, and publicly when he's on the field. So the one challenge that we don't know, and the one thing we truly don't know about AP is, did he receive advice from those folks that you just mentioned, whether it be the Marvin Lewises or the Philbins, for example? And did he receive that advice and simply ignore it? Or did they simply just not provide him sound advice, and that's why they're not coaching really that much or anymore?
I think it's a mixture of both, Richie.
Yeah,
I mean, it could be. It could be. But the point is that we don't know. So for me and from my perspective, just knowing a lot about some of the back end stuff that I know occurred in the Denver Broncos organization, with the meddling that took place from different folks mucking about within coaching and stuff that occurred on the field and player personnel and that sort of thing, I have a very healthy, almost overly skeptical approach when I look at things and hear stuff like that, because I know what happened with my Denver Broncos. And there was a lot, and I mean a lot, of mucking about by folks that had no business mucking about in certain portions of the roster. So I'm always skeptical on whether or not it was what you hear versus what actually happened. And the question is, what did the product look like on the field? And so what I mean by that is, do you see a Philbin kind of style at all on the field? And if the answer is no, I have a hard time believing that he's not going to want to have an input into that, because he's going to want to be able to point to, as part of the success of your Las Vegas Raiders, to say, well, did you see the thing where that happened? Like, and I use that as an example because we had an offensive line coach in Musgrave that was with the Denver Broncos, a handful of years ago now, who came in during a time where the Denver Broncos offense was not doing very well. And Musgrave's big thing, and on the offensive side of the ball, especially in the run game, and as a wrinkle when it comes to offensive plays, is flanking tight ends in 2 tight end sets, on literally flanking the left tackle and flanking the right tackle. And some of our most successful offensive plays that year were when we were in those sets, and that is a Musgrave look. That's what he does. That's kind of his offensive scheme, all that sort of thing. As a result of that success, I believe he then got a job as a result of being able to point to those plays and say, who do you think had the most successful offensive scheme in plays for the Denver Broncos? When they finally listened to what I told them to do, they actually did okay. When they didn't listen to what I told them to do, you kind of sucked. And so I think he was able to capitalize on that. And I think Philbin and Marvin Lewis, if they were truly wanting to help themselves out, would have almost wanted to force their input. And I wonder if AP was intentionally trying to tamp them down, because it's a bit of a, well, Marvin, you have a name, I don't. I'm trying to make my name, so I don't want to pull your stuff in and then have people say, well, it was all Marvin Lewis, why do you need AP? Just as an example.
And that's likely as well. And you see what's become of Antonio Pierce. If you don't listen to the sage advice of people who actually know something, you are looking for a job. And right. Musgrave, that sounds really familiar. Could it be that, like, the offensive coordinator the last time that Derek Carr actually had an offense that worked? Thank you.
Yeah.
Right.
Speaking of Carr, he might be a cap casualty.
Yeah, well, let's put it this way. Do you see the Raiders and the auspices of Tom Brady bringing in a guy by the name of Derek Carr when Tom Brady was the same dude who said, you're going to keep that mother instead of me? I don't see it.
No.
Great point.
Great point.
Sorry, I misspoke.
I'm a decent guy.
Sorry, I misspoke, guys.
Got a raw deal from
it was Mike Munchak.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
and it was Mike Munchak.
I heard you, Jack. I was listening to you.
Munchak was a fantastic player for the Oilers and a great offensive lineman.
Right. So sorry, I just got the name wrong. I misspoke there. It was Mike Munchak that came over to Denver. His offensive play style is the flanking tight ends. He had some fantastic play calls here in his contributions to our offense at the time, and he was then, I think, parlayed that into a job with another team after the fact. So
I believe so. I thought he went back. I thought he went back to the Titans, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. So
I think he did.
The Super Bowl largely was obviously, Alex, as you agree with, and we kind of all, we were in violent agreement rather in terms of how that Super Bowl was won. It was defensive line on the Eagles side, and offensive line collapse on the KC side, which really stifled pretty much any hope of coming back and or winning that game for your team. I do agree with you in terms of your general analysis that your defense, despite the box score, which looked heavily skewed, actually played fairly well because so many of those points were actually scored by the Eagles defense, which is often overlooked, because when you see a score, you just assume automatically that it was like, for sure, that was all offense, right? But that wasn't
only
the
be out
case
there so long before it gives up.
Yeah. And so, to your defense's credit, I thought you guys did very well. I thought you held up very well given circumstances. I do think that one thing that will be looked at this offseason for the Kansas City Chiefs is a power rusher of some kind, or some way of combating the big-bodied, strong offensive linemen. So whether or not you look at
Myles Garrett or Micah Parsons, fucking better not.
But again, that is certainly something that I do believe the Chiefs are going to be digging into, because they, obviously when you go through a devastating loss like that, and make no mistake, I think Alex would agree, that was a pretty devastating loss for any franchise.
Sure.
And I'm willing to even admit that, for example, you had one against the Tampa Bay Bucks and my Denver Broncos. Look, Matt, I don't disagree, but I do think that it's important that when we assess your enemy, that you're able to obtain the most amount of information possible so that you can in fact beat them, and kill them with kindness so that you can beat them on the field, I guess would be a good mantra there. But when I look at how my Denver Broncos got absolutely just destroyed when we played the Seahawks in the Super Bowl, for example, 2014, what you saw was a team that was offensive heavy, but their offensive line was not built to beat the Seahawks at the absolute strength of their team. And we saw that with the Chiefs against, the Tampa Bay Bucks. And you saw that again this past year with the Eagles. So I think looking back and properly assessing yourself and making sure that you're able to combat and overcome some of those issues is a big deal. And I also think that it may come down to, and I know this is obviously, Alex, something that you may not want to hear, but it may come down to a fact that Veach and Reed have a bit of a sit down and simply say, look, the stuff that we need to fix is potentially not fixable in one season. We may need to get ourselves positioned in such a way that we remain competitive, but we're not going to be able to fix it. And to Captain Jack's point earlier in the show, trying to wrap this all up into a neat and tidy bow, sometimes that means not making it deep into the playoffs and ending up with a slightly better draft pick, then giving you better options in order to get the missing piece or two that you're missing in that next off season. And then you go on a run where you potentially win, 5 different Super Bowls and then end up winning 3 instead. So, I mean, that ain't bad either, right? So,
did intentionally.
Yeah. Like that's not a bad plan either, right? And so the point there is going into it with a plan on the onset coming into it. So you're not just kind of throwing past at a wall and seeing if it sticks, right? You're coming into it saying, here's what we need, here's how we believe we're going to do it. 2026's draft, let's say, may have better top shelf offensive linemen. So maybe you guys then say, do you know what? We're going to trade away some things now to get a future pick in 2026 to really stockpile those things. We're going to come into the 2025 year. We're going to be somewhat competitive. And then 2026 is going to be the complete retool year where we get ourselves back on track. And, our goal is in the next 3 years after that to get back to at least 1 Super Bowl. And maybe that works, maybe that doesn't, but I could see that being an organizational plan for the Kansas City Chiefs, because when you got Mahomes, who is still the best quarterback in football until proven otherwise, you always have a chance.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with that. I mean, that's why I said it's going to be an interesting offseason, because they're kind of at a proverbial, fork in the road, if you will. Like, do we strive to keep the sustained success we're at, or do we take a step back to regroup for
reload or something,
the hopefully next wave of a run? But either way, you can never really, in my opinion, you can never really count them out with someone like Mahomes. Like, look at Buffalo. This was supposed to be a down year for them, and because of, mostly Josh Allen, they were still in the same boat. So, that's why I don't really see him like totally stripping it down and just starting over. And I think, probably strive to fix the 1 or 2 glaring holes that there are with the team, and maybe get a little younger, but ultimately try to be in the same competitive realm they've been in. But we'll see.
Yeah. So just for everyone watching, thank you all for joining. Regardless of what channel you're on, help us grow, help us get more AFC West fans in here. Click that like button down below in whichever channel you are in. And if you're in, say, Captain Jack's channel, come over to MHRT Network and click that like button, and vice versa. If you're an MHRT Network, go ahead and jump on over to Captain Jack's channel and give this video a like over there. Helps grow the channel, helps reach other football fans just like you, so we can get a lot of great banter going here in the chat. With that in mind, also, guys, next week, this show is going to start looking ahead. We're going to start looking and reassessing kind of what we saw in the Super Bowl, but we're going to apply it by looking at whether it be players, coaches, whatever it may be, because we are now officially in the offseason where we are all going to be assessing our rosters and making those decisions, Alex, like we just spoke about, just moments ago, where all of our rosters and all of our teams are going to be going over changes, whether we like it or not. So we'll predict who we're going to keep, who we're going to let go, who we think we should target as teams, all those sorts of things. Obviously, we won't be able to cover all of that in one episode, but we will be trying to get that over the next few episodes in terms of kind of what sort of decisions we'd like to see our teams make. But either way, we're going to have a lot of stuff to go over because all of us are now back to ground zero. We've until proven otherwise, we all have a chance and we can all make a difference on our teams with the right moves. And it'll be very, very interesting.
1.0. 2.0, 3.0, and then 9.0 up there going in. And then what free agency is around the corner? I believe that's March 15th, I believe.
Correct. Yes. Yeah.
It's coming up.
It's about a month. It is approximately a month from today. Approximately, just roughly speaking.
I'd like to say on behalf of Sid and Richie and Alex and DZ, fantastic that you guys do what you do. Obviously, I got it wrong. Fantastic work by my man Kenna, who represents the Raider Nation on auspices for Raider problems when I'm not able to join. And I'm gonna be busy off and on, but I appreciate. Yeah, I was gonna say, isn't it great that it's day 4 of a smug-free era? In the United States, and I can't wait to get back to Kansas if I get back for my part-time job, and see all of these people that I had to deal with for the 2 weeks leading up to the Super Bowl and just strut in like, hey, haven't seen you since January. What's happened? Let's catch up. But anyway,
that is in Leavenworth, by the way, right?
Yeah, I was in Lebanon. Now, there's 2 times that I've worked at prisons, but I've had the wonderfulness of working on the outside of the prison, not on the inside. I was in Gitmo for 2 years, but I got a chance to go home every day. I'm just saying, So the Leavenworth is the second. Yeah, if you didn't know, I worked in Gitmo for 2 years. But anyway, working in Leavenworth is
what's 60 miles? 60 miles from Florida, but I mean that flight every day to and from has got to be pretty wild.
Yeah, well, I tell you what, it's easier to catch a flight from Afghanistan home than it was to go from Gitmo to the United States, and I am not kidding. I am not kidding.
I'll take your word on that.
Trust
one.
me.
Yeah,
it was easier to go home from Afghanistan to Europe than it was from Gitmo. There are 2 flights a week to get back to the States. 2. And if you weren't on them, you weren't there. So anyway, thanks for the rim shot there, DZ. But again, I want to thank all of the crew here, Richie, Alex, DZ, my man Jack Kenna, for holding down the Raider Nation aspect. I appreciate Divine to come in to gloat. Alex, sorry I couldn't miss this show. But it'll be fun. It'll be fun to get back to Kansas and get a chance to smack up with some of the smug fans there. But make sure, like Richie said, if you're watching this show and you see the great aspects for the standout superior performance of people who know what they're talking about for their teams, Richie, Alex, DZ, and Jack Kenna, for Wild Wild West, go over to MHRT Network and get some really great sports broadcasting there. You have to deal with Mundungus on times as well, but he's so full of shit. It's how you coming in. But he's a good guy as well.
Spence will give you a cheers.
What? Sorry.
Oh, I said Spence will give you a cheers. He goes with Bill.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and they got some really good things on MHRT. So come over. But again, if you don't see me, it's not lost because you will have a great time here on Wild Wild West, no matter who's on. And if I'm not here, don't worry. Kenna has the con, baby. Just like when Kirk would leave, hey, Sulu and Spock had the con, and they did pretty well for the Enterprise when I was gone. So again, thanks again, guys, for allowing me to come in.
Have a good one. So we're gonna quickly wrap up the show here for this week. It was obviously a yet another AFC West team in the dance, something that we are familiar with, and obviously the Chiefs did not three-peat, which leaves that record still available in the record books for somebody else to attain. Although, we can all agree that there's a reason why it has not been done, because the NFL is the NFL. But ladies and gentlemen, we're going to move on and come back and see you next week on Wednesday, where we're going to start getting into breaking down the teams and our needs and wants and whatnot there. If you have any comments as to where you would like us to start with that, you can leave those down below on this video, and we will check those out prior to the show next week. And we will be communicating with you on X in terms of what we're going to try to cover off. And on X, if you'd like to follow us there, it is at Wild Wild West. You can find us there on X. You can search up the podcast, follow us there, and interact that way to give us maybe show topics, or if you'd like us to cover specific either players or elements within each of the next topics coming up, happy to do so and get right down into the weeds with you, because that's really what makes this show a little bit different. This is certainly more than just a bunch of fans of a single team rambling off about how wonderful their team is. Because this is a mixed bag sort of show, you typically end up with the real football fans in terms of digging right into the details in terms of their teams and who they like and who they dislike. But anyways, guys, until next week, where the West Side is the best side, Alex, DZ, Jack, and Captain Jack, thank you all for joining us again and giving your input and doing all the wonderful things. And peace.